because you are handicapped in this way, you must live a life of suffering and that's how you serve God. But you seem to be a walking contradiction to that sort of putting somebody in a box. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Mic'd Up. I'm your host, David Gordon. This week, we're going to be talking about an area where the theology has been lackluster and where the conventional stock replies have left many unsatisfied and longing for deeper answers. We're looking at the vocation of the sick and disabled, how they're called to witness the gospel with their lives. Too many have reduced them simply to suffering souls and passive conduits of sacrifice, but that's an inadequate and dehumanizing idea. While certainly some, by circumstance and misfortune, are so ill that they can do nothing other than pray, this isn't the case for the vast majority, even of the significantly handicapped. Indeed, they, like the hale, are called to help bring the kingdom of God to its fullness by the witness of their daily lives and their activity upon the earth, not just through spirituality. Joining us today to help shed light on this topic is Dr. Anton Raymundo, an anesthesiologist who became disabled after a botched procedure. Dr. Raymundo, also a Wharton graduate, now serves as a Catholic retreat director, speaker, radio host, and national advocate for the handicapped. Thanks so much for being with us today, Dr. Raymundo.
Thank you, David, for letting me be on your show, Mic'd Up. It's an honor to be here.
No, we appreciate having you, so the pleasure is ours. And just briefly, Doctor, could you take us through, obviously this has been quite a journey for you, and you told me before the show you were bedridden for 13 years. Can you give us the backstory to all of that, to your injury, to the circumstances that you found yourself in now, and ultimately, your disability?
Sure. Well, just to clarify, it was 13 years I was disabled. The first 3 years I was bedridden. So I was trained as an anesthesiologist, and when I went into private practice, I got injured essentially on the job. I used to work these really long shifts as a OB anesthesiologist, a general anesthesiologist, but I took a lot of call. And what happened on one particular night, there was a lady who was going to deliver, but she was bleeding to death. And we had emergency surgery. We didn't have that many people available to help except myself and one nurse. And so from the gurney, I transferred her from the gurney, pretty much lifting her on my own with the nurse just holding the feet of the pregnant mom, and then who was bleeding to death. And I put her on the operating table, and I hurt my back that way, and then we proceeded with surgery. And even though I got hurt, the mom and baby, his life was saved. But then I ended up having to get treated, and I had a procedure done on my back, and that was essentially botched, where the nerves were pretty much injured to the point where I wasn't paralyzed, so I wasn't crippled in that way, wheelchair bound, but the pain was so excruciating, similar to what you may call like RSD, reflex sympathetic dystrophy. For the audience, one can think how Jesus, when he was nailed on the cross, the nails going through the median nerve of his wrist would cause this electric pain and shock every time he took a breath or just moved. And so for me, that was in my lower back down towards my legs. And so anytime I moved, it would just be so excruciating that I was pretty much relegated to the bed, where my wife would have to, help me get up, get dressed, feed me, bathe me, and clothe me. And so in those 3 years, it was very, tough, especially because, I couldn't work anymore as an anesthesiologist. We had a 2-year-old son at that point, and then we just lost our newborn baby. And then so things just started crumbling really fast, where I'm not working, and we have a new house, a baby that just died, and then losing my health and all our life savings, that it felt like a mini Job story. And so with that, most people would think, well, all I could do was just pray, but actually that was the first thing that I went to. It wasn't like just the last resort. I grew up as a Catholic, really just loving the faith, being involved with a lot of apologetics, serving the church as a lector, Eucharistic minister. So when I was now the patient, instead of the doctor treating people, that it was a difficult task, but it actually made my faith stronger, my marriage stronger. We actually grew our family still, despite all that, because we literally got in poverty, losing all that, we had to sell our house, car, and everything. And we weren't able to get any help as far as with insurance, where I just had to hire a lawyer to get assistance, and that took a lot of effort, especially when I was in pain. But thanks be to God, He came through. But I didn't get healed until 10 years after I was was bedridden for 3. So in total 13. But in that time, what I wanted to stress about is the vocation of the sick and being disabled. I used that time as best as I can, where as soon as I was, able to no longer be bedridden, I went into the Wharton School in Philadelphia. We lived in California at the time. And prior to me getting injured, I was actually accepted to the Wharton School. So as if my plans of being, in medical management was being derailed. But so even though I got injured for those first 3 years bedridden, as soon as I was able to use crutches and use a cane to get up and about, that's when I came over to Philadelphia to try to get an MBA. And in that process, I got a master's in business in finance and accounting. I became a lay Carmelite, which helped me pray and deal with the pain. Because as an anesthesiologist, I know how easy it is for people to get addicted to medications. And I was hoping that I would get cured and go back, and I didn't want to get addicted to any kind of medications. So I used my ability to pray and in my faith to dealing with the pain. And being a Carmelite was that charism that helped me focus on how to pray and pray better and offer up this pain and suffering in a redemptive manner to try to unite it with Christ.
Okay, so let me just jump in here. So this is about 3 years now after the initial injury that you were going to Wharton?
So it was after the 3 years when I was bedridden that we, I was able to start up this Wharton, but I wasn't strong enough as I thought, so I had to take a leave of absence.
How did you get out of bed and get to a place where you could attend Wharton, or at least that you thought you would be healthy enough and able-bodied enough to enroll in a graduate school like that? Was there something that you did? Was there some treatment that you used? I know you said you used a lot of prayer and you offered your suffering up, but was there some mechanism that helped you attain some degree of health in your body? The medicines, the epidural steroids they would give that really didn't help, and different other treatments. And so I primarily relied upon my prayer, actually. And so I have a lot of pain tolerance to the point that, like one time, I got kidney stones, and people in the emergency room didn't even believe that I had kidney stones because I wasn't screaming or yelling in pain. In fact, when I was waiting in the emergency room, I was watching some late night show and laughing. So they thought, well, he's not seriously having a kidney stone. And I said, I'm a physician. I have a kidney stone. I'm telling you, I have one. And the funny story about that is they did some imaging and they couldn't find it, but I said it's there, so you just can't see it. And so they just sent me home. And when I went home, what happened is the kidney stones were passed. They just didn't find it on the imaging. So what I'm trying to say is I can tolerate a lot of pain, but when it gets to be
the point where you can't really walk for those first 3 years. That's what did it. So when I had the chance to just use crutches, that's when I had that determination. So let's move out to Pennsylvania, where I originally got accepted there for the Wharton School, and let's try it. And
so you're just going to He-Man it, essentially. You're going to say
it didn't work out originally.
Sure.
So what happened was I couldn't finish up as far as those first few classes. So I had to take a leave of absence for another 4 more years before I can get back in.
Sure.
Yeah. So it was premature for me to even try, but I wanted to get going because we were in poverty, and I just tried to get school loans to try to live off, and some friends and families to help me. And this is where the church really came involved, where different parishioners would help people from the giving donations from food and clothing and so forth, helping us out. It showed the community how the parish is a vital part of helping those who are sick and disabled or elderly or lonely.
100%. Yeah, that's definitely something where we in the opulent West have lost our understanding of just how much the church can engage in this charity, especially on the parish community, and how parishioners can help one another. And you'll see it sometimes, like when my wife had her first baby, we had parishioners dropping things off. I can only imagine the charity and the love somebody can receive when they are in obviously more dire circumstances as you were. So let me ask, at this point, were you feeling like, was there a trend upwards in terms of your health? Were you recuperating some, or was it pretty much just a stasis in a place where you didn't want to be?
It was pretty much a stasis where I didn't want to be up until the year 2000. So when I originally got injured, it was 1995. And so the year 2000 was when I was able to get back at the Wharton School, and I was able to finish in 2004. And I had to it's really a 2-year program, but I had to just take things at halftime because it was just that taxing physically. I mean, mentally it's very rigorous. Medical school was tough, and business school was also tough. And so, but going through the Wharton School was very rewarding, and it was a witness to people there to seeing me walking around hobbling with a cane and a back brace on, and then wheeling around the books to get to class, and people would help me to go to each class and get a chair. And so there was a lot of charity, a lot of brotherhood with the students there at the Wharton School and the Christian Fellowship, that they're helping people like me to try to succeed and remake my life. And even to the point when we had a graduation ceremony, the professors were crying and seeing how hard it was for me to go from class to class and just to make it through. And so I was able to graduate in 2004 there. With a degree, an MBA in finance and accounting. Wow. No, that's quite an accomplishment, obviously, given the circumstances. It's quite an accomplishment anyway, given that it's Wharton, which is obviously cream of the crop, premier, Ivy League, and whatnot. Okay, so then tell us, what about your journey after that? Where did you go after your graduation from Wharton? What happened? Well, thank you. Well, the interesting thing is, even though I graduated from a premier business school in the world, that people weren't hiring me. It was very apparent that I was disabled, hobbling along. I'd get through all to the final interview, and without them saying, because it would be illegal, for them not to hire somebody because of their disability.
Of course.
That I had all the qualifications there. I'm one of the few people with an MBA with a dual degree in finance and accounting, and with an MD who was practicing. And so yet I was not being hired. So for a few years, I had to just take some odd jobs. So I got to teach, in the local university and also, work for the Wharton School and some research. But it wasn't like the upper echelon jobs, which Wharton MBAs, deserve. And so it got to the point where 3 years later, where we had a miraculous healing. And when I say we, it was my wife was praying. Not that she wouldn't pray all those years. It was 13 years in the making, but it turned out that the money that I was making these odd jobs. I'm not calling being an adjunct professor an odd job, but it's like I wasn't practicing as a physician or being in as a medical director or CEO of a medical company. That it wasn't enough to support our large growing family, and at that point we had 5 children, what happened in that year, 2007, we were, we ran out of all the loan money and of course for school, and then working, that my wife had this time with the Lord where she was just crying her eyes out and holding a crucifix and saying that, there's, no one's really hiring me for what I can do, what I'm worth. And she was praying, and we're still having a hard time with everything, with finances and all. And so after she prayed, that the next morning I just woke up. It happened to be October 1st, which is the feast of Saint Therese Lisieux, the little flower. And I felt like the back pain was totally gone. It was always there with me for all those 13 years. That it's unmistakable. And I would just grin and bear it. But that day and for the next 3 days, I just kept quiet to myself. I didn't tell anybody it, thinking that it's a fluke because it's always there. And then I told my wife, and then she couldn't believe it. And she said, well, when did this happen? I said, 3 days ago. I said, well, that's the day I prayed. She stormed heaven with prayers to our son who passed away, our baby, Andre, and then her dad, Saint Joseph, the Blessed Mother, Saint Therese, of course, and all the various saints. But just because it happened on October 1st, we credit it to Saint Therese. And coincidentally, I was a Carmelite at that point for already 10 years. And so that's what changed, where then, I can do anything now as far as physically. I had doctors.
Let me just break in there. So you were in, if you could rate your pain prior to this miraculous seeming occurrence, what would it be? Like 1 to 10 sort of pain in the back?
10 being the worst. It ranged from always 8, 9, or 10.
Okay, and then you woke up one morning after your wife concluded these prayers, and it was at, I guess, a 0 or 1?
Yeah, it was gone. It was all gone. So I what you call had to, I wanted to go see the doctors to get cleared. And I saw 2 independent doctors, and they essentially said they haven't seen anything like this because your back doesn't look better at all. And yet I wasn't feeling any pain. So in other words, like it wasn't like a brand new back. It was all normal. It looked as horrible as before, but you're not feeling any pain whatsoever.
Sure, it's not like the Lord's medical bureau type thing where it's like, here was the leg that was broken, and then you were you had this ablution of water, and then all of a sudden the leg is like mended back together. It's not that. It's just while your back was still hurt, the physiological signs were still there. The pain had been nixed.
Yes, and so this was just a confirmation to me that all these years that I dedicated my pain and suffering to in uniting it with Christ, it gave me meaning, and also that I knew just how inside my heart that someday I'd be healed. I didn't know how long, but I just stayed persistent. And also just the other side story was, I remember asking, the Lord helped many times, but there was one piece of scripture that really helped me where the Lord approached a cripple and he said, do you want to be well? And And essentially, I just took that as the Lord asked me. I said, of course, I want to be well. And lo and behold, he made me well, but it was through the intercession of my wife. And so to me, it's a very key for families, for spouses, when they pray with each other. And that's what our family did. We prayed. They would gather around, kneeling around the bed, praying different novenas and rosaries. So our family grew stronger and stronger, whereas some families, they are destroyed with the loss of a job, unemployment, disability, no money, and they won't grow their family in faith that God will provide. Yet we grew our family from 1 to 5 during that time, and just trusting in the Lord that He would provide and He would heal.
Absolutely. Same boat, as a matter of fact. Every time, I've needed something to fall into place because, we're a family with 6 kids. Everything has worked out so that, no one ever had to go hungry. I think God does definitely work in those ways. Let me just probe a little bit deeper here. Is this the first time, though, that you had been praying for healing when you got this spontaneous remission of pain? Was that the culmination of a campaign of prayer, or was it just like, we're going to start praying for this thing, and then when you started praying for this, overnight you received a cure?
A great question. No, it was persistence and patient prayer all throughout. So, we, like I said, we did novenas. We would visit different shrines. Here, when we came in Philadelphia, we're blessed to be the only city that have 2 saints, being the St. John Newman, and then also St. Catherine Drexel. So we visited those, and also we went out to Pittsburgh, where St. Anthony's Chapel, I think they have like over 5,000 relics. Just to try to get, different miracles or blessings, and went to different, events where there are priests, whether, like Father Groeschel would come out here, or Father Karapi, or Father Andrew Apostle, many of the people you would see on EWTN. And that's what gave me a lot also of a lot of comfort, because during those times of laying on the bed, watching shows from a good, an excellent Catholic network, but also like I would, tout your show and Church Militant, who is to me like just like Mother Angelica, but even on another level now. With all these different programmings. And so to me, this is a great comfort that, when people go on your show, and hopefully when they hear this, that they can get some inspiration, that they too can get healing and consolation one way or another.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Yeah, likewise, we hope that anyone who's in need of consolation and prayer, that they take some heart and they take solace after seeing this episode. What do you think it is that caused this final prayer to be efficacious in the way you wanted? Was there something special about it? Was there something unique or different about it than the way you'd been praying up until you had received this gift of healing?
That's another great insight. I had always told my wife, I said, I feel in my heart and my mind, I knew I would be healed one day. Somehow I had this inner awareness and confidence that God would heal me for a purpose, for a certain purpose. And I had told my wife that if both of us had this prayer that was very intense and devoted, that it's like both lungs working or both sides of the heart working, and then that would happen. My wife is a very devout, pious person, but there's also a certain level of prayer. And from what I gathered from my wife is she actually hit that level. In other words, it wasn't just vocal prayer. It wasn't just mouthing the prayers of the rosary. It was speaking from her heart. And when she had that depth and combined with what I was already praying, and then also our family, it just reached a certain peak. And like a vibration, like when a person's singing opera and the level goes so high that the glass would vibrate and break. Well, to me, it was like that. Our whole family had a symphony of prayers that vibrated heaven so much that it broke all those that barrier of being disabled to now being healed and healthy.
Sure. Sometimes, of course, God allows us this suffering to continue to a certain point because he wants us to glean something from it or learn something from it or increase in our faith. And then sometimes it's like a child asking you as a parent, you know this, if they're just casually asking something, then you might brush something aside or say, no, not right now. But when your child implores you with great fervor, and you can see, pain and trepidation on his face, then of course that can move your heart, and that can change things. So yes. Obviously that's an analogy for the divine, and only an analogy, but God calls himself Father, so we can recur to that analogy and be on safe ground. Okay, so let's jump ahead. Well, actually, let me focus on one more bit that I think the audience will find useful and interesting. When you explained the lack of pain to your doctors, were they surprised, or did they think that this is something that you kind of should be feeling just by rote, regular medical causes? Right.
So they were astounded in that when they said they haven't seen anything like this, because I can bend down, touch my toes, rotate, my body here and there and bend. They would expect that because of a herniated disc and how my back is all degenerative, that it can't withstand all that movement. And then nonetheless, later on, I was able to play golf, to coach a flag football team, lift weights, and like they couldn't believe I'd be doing that and not cause further harm or further pain, spasms, or nerve damage. And so it was all gone, and it just. That was surprising in itself. I had training in pain management as well, so it was one thing for me to help treat people who were in chronic pain, and I became like the advertisement for that in a certain sense. But I just knew that for me to ever get back to practicing anesthesia, that I wanted to make sure that I would not be taking those kinds of medicines. And I followed that. I was able to do that because I just know how Jesus on the cross, how he refused to take the drink of the myrrh, which is actually has morphine-like effects, like right. A narcotic effect. So in his most excruciating pain, he did not take any. And so, I tried to follow that way, to offer that pain and unite it with Christ to help save souls. One other thing I wanted to mention, so the audience doesn't misinterpret how, when you asked about what was it about this prayer that changed it? That is what we did, but I don't want to take credit that it's our efforts. By no means. It's Jesus Christ. He's the divine physician. He's the one that heals when he wills and as he wills. And also, of course, the prayers of the parishioners and Carmelites and friends and neighbors who would do so. So it's both, the church militant, the church triumphant helping us out. And who knows if in the church suffering as well, because I also offered prayers to those in purgatory as well. Of course, yeah. Now, I don't think too many people would have accused you of some kind of Pelagianism for that, but yeah, no, it's a good nota bene. So thank you. Okay, so the cure was pretty much the criteria of the church: immediate, permanent, and medically inexplicable. Yes. So that's how I viewed it, and of course the doctors won't call it a miracle, just like with, if we go forward and talk about my current issue, where, I'm considered to be dependent on oxygen. If you want to talk about that now. Yeah, no, definitely. No, let's jump into that. Hey, I'm dependent on oxygen too, though, in a certain sense. So I'm right there with you. Supplementary oxygen, I mean. Yes. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, so what happened after, how long were you able-bodied and healthy after you received that answered prayer? Yeah, so that was from 2007 all the way to just 2021 here, where I was pretty much working out a lot and running 10 to 30 miles a week, keeping good health and a good nutrition and exercise regimen, and working. And so I got to the kind of job that's deserving of a physician and an MBA. And so things worked out well, how the Lord provided. But just 2 years ago, in 2021, is when I ended up getting COVID. And I had a pretty severe case of that where I was in respiratory distress. And it was very tough thinking about how it all happened, that I almost died 3 times. I was in ICU for 30 days. And then bedridden 6 months after, had to relearn how to walk. I was on oxygen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, very weak. I looked like skin and bones back then. Slowly through a lot of different prayers, I was able to get stronger, but I'm still not better as far as the lungs. It's totally scarred on both sides, and the doctors say that there is no cure for me at this point. They don't think I should have a lung transplant, or even if that would help me at this point, or there's any medicines or trials. And so the only thing left is, one good Catholic doctor that you had on your show, Dr. Scott French, said he thinks that the only thing left is a miracle for me. And so I'm just leaving that to God. And in the meanwhile, I still need supplementary oxygen to just walk and just do normal activities, from just changing up to, brushing my teeth, washing my face. Otherwise, in just that short period of time, I'm just so short of breath and hypoxic that I need oxygen. I can't go up the stairs to my bedroom without the oxygen, or just walk to get the mail down the driveway without being so short of breath. And so in the old medical books, they would call a person like myself and those who need or dependent on supplementary oxygen as a pulmonary cripple. It's pretty offensive nowadays to use those words, but essentially that's what the words were back then. And so even though I can walk, I can only walk very slowly, and I have to wheel around an oxygen tank. And I tell people that, that's my cross, but my cross has wheels, whereas Jesus' crucifix didn't have wheels. So there's at least my cross is lighter than what Jesus had, and I'm just going to carry it and try to help Jesus carry his cross, like Simon the Cyrene.
Sure. No, an excellent perspective on it. Obviously, that's the proper way to accept and even embrace one's pain, obviously. And there's a long history of this in the church, in the Catholic tradition. Was your COVID, the severity of that COVID, related to your previous injury or your previous condition in any way? Because you talk about 2 unlucky events in a row, like life-changing medical injuries.
Yes, yeah. It was, like I said, I had, it's not related. In fact, when I got COVID, that I was healthy, like running, again, anywhere from 10 to 30 miles a week, no smoking history, no asthma, nothing. I didn't have any medical issues at all. And so for me to have this outcome was a shock to me, but also everybody else, because they would say, well, look at Cardinal Burke, he was intubated and you weren't, and he recovered and has no problems, whereas mine is a chronic issue, whereas all those others, people who had it is even worse than theirs resolved, and they don't have the chronic issue or the dependency now on supplementary oxygen. And so there's been some reports, I don't know if I believe it or not, there's supposedly some, genetic predispositions for Asians, but, I don't know if that was true or false, but I just know as for me, and some of my relatives, I'm Filipino by background, that they also had it pretty bad when they had COVID. Well, my relative has to get a organ transplant because of getting COVID. But yeah, so it was a very tough to have, and it's still very humbling because people will see me, and when in the car, coming out of the car, parking and just in the handicapped place, people won't think I'm handicapped when they look at me, and then I walk out, and then they see me taking the oxygen tank, and they'll see, oh, now I get it. But some people come up and approach me and say, you're not handicapped, and they don't realize, that yes, I am, even though I don't look like it like on as you see me now, but I am in the sense that I'm dependent on oxygen. So, God has a sense of humor too. The other thing is, since I'm no longer practicing anesthesiologist, what this led me into is actually I'm a physician that helps the disabled. So before I got COVID back in 2016, I was already specializing as a medical consultant for the disabled. And it just turned out that God shifted another gear for me to understand in a deeper level how to help all those with COVID, all those who are crippled. And so I get the honor to help those who are literally blind, deaf, cripple. And I get to do this every day. And what's strange about it is, when I came home from the hospital, and I was bedridden for 6 months, I still worked 1 week after I came home from the hospital. I was in our makeshift hospital room, which is our dining room. We rented out a hospital bed, and I was laying essentially flat or a little bit inclined on the hospital bed, working on my computer, doing cases for those who were disabled, and analyzing their cases so they can get, benefits for themselves, when I was sicker than them. And so, it was rewarding for me to help those others, even though I was suffering amidst all of it, and people didn't realize it.
Okay, so just a couple more questions just about that condition, and then this really brings us to the meat of the interview, and we'll get into that in a second, because I do think that's a good jumping off point for exactly what we want to talk about. But just so you're stable now medically. I know you said the doctors said that the scarring in the lungs was to a certain point where there's no cure for it, but have you at least reached a point of stability where there's no further degradation?
Yes, so it is, thanks be to God, it's stable. But they always try to caution me that if there's anything else that comes up, another round of a virus like this or get pneumonia, that it can get so bad that I can die from that. Sure. So yes, but at this point, thanks be to God, it's stable. But I'm still on oxygen. I'm just hoping to get off of that, be back to normal again. But yes,
of course, God willing. Okay, so. Then, is it bothering you to do this, even an interview like this? I know sometimes when I talk up here, I get short of breath if I'm not pacing myself okay. When you're doing something like this, is it to the point where even giving a long talk or delivering kind of your story would be taxing on the lungs?
It can be. I actually have, a podcast and 2 other radio shows. And this past weekend, I did a national conference, and yes, it was apparent I was short of breath, especially when I talk too fast or if I stand up and talk too long. Yes, but right now I'm just sitting down. I'm okay at this point. Sure. But this is, to me, again, this is just part of offering it up and being able to share my story so others can take inspiration, hopefully, and keep on being that wounded soldier who can still serve Christ and fight the good fight.
100%. Yeah, and that's really what we want to punch right here. So you've had, I don't want to say luxury, because obviously you've had serious tribulations in life, but you have this unique perspective because you've been of sound body, and then you've been to a place where you were bedridden, and then you've got past that. You were given a gift of being able to get your mobility back and live a relatively pain-free life, and then to have your health taken in a way that it's not perhaps as debilitating as the first back injury, but you're still in a place where obviously you're at the mercy of an oxygen tank. That's a unique story, and that gives you a depth of insight, I think, into what we're going to probe right now. And number one, I think that and correct me if I'm wrong, I'd like to just hear your thoughts on this. I think there's an impression among people where they want to picture think, they want to over-categorize something, and they hear about people who are sick, who are ill, who are crippled, or invalid, or something to that effect, and they think, oh, that's a suffering soul. The way he is going to serve God here is just strictly offering up pain and suffering. And to me, that's wrong. You know, obviously, we're all called to offer up pain and suffering, and some people have acute pain and suffering. And you read about this in the lives of the saints, about saints that say, God, give me even more suffering as I'm on my deathbed so I can offer it up to you. Sure, there's a place for that, and everyone should do that. I recommend that to them. But that doesn't mean that's all you do. And again, we tend to picture think and say, because you are in this situation, because you are handicapped in this way, you must live a life of suffering, and that's how you serve God. But you seem to be a walking contradiction to that sort of putting somebody in a box.
Well, to me, you know, I love sports, and I always looked at the sports heroes that they will play even though they're hurt.
Jordan scored 65 when he had the flu, right?
Yeah. So the point is, you know, someone could have their, you know, bones broken and still play, you know, and run and throw as a quarterback, you know. And so you have these heroic stories. So I looked at it in the same way, that this cross that God gave me, and actually this pulmonary fibrosis that I have, it is, to me, way worse than the back injury. And even though it's just been 2 years, the fact is I wasn't going to die with a back injury, but with the COVID and this pulmonary fibrosis, I'm always at the brink of risking my life because of this. And so, but yeah, what I know is that, and I just tried to be that example that, again, like when I came back from the hospital, 1 week after the fact, I was working from my hospital bed and working full time. And I didn't pity myself. I just kept on, you know, working on the computer. And I just tried to do, you know, taking different calls and consulting and helping others so they can get better, even though I wasn't even out of the woods yet. Because we didn't know if my pulmonary fibrosis was the kind that you die in 1 to 3 years, which is what they call idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. They weren't really sure if it was totally from COVID or was it from something else, you see. But now that they came up with this, yes, it was after the fact. It was COVID pneumonia.
So, yeah, I mean, you seem to be called very much contrary to the idea that you're just a suffering soul that goes into isolation and offers up pain for the salvation of perhaps others. It seems like God is calling you to a public place where you're actually ministering to people now, where you are modeling for them stoicism and valor and actually showing people how to carry their cross. So you're serving God, it seems like, in a very hands-on way, which absolutely undercuts, I think, what's the popular narrative of people who are sick, ill, disabled, and what have you.
Well, thank you. I mean, of course, we're not, you know, demeaning anybody who really can't walk, or, you know, or they're bedridden and they're housebound. I mean, because I already lived that. But my point is, I know with the willpower that I have, that with God's help, you know, it's Deo Volente, with God willing, you know, I can do anything through Christ who strengthens me. And so that's how I take it. And the way I look at it, as if I'm a wounded soldier walking along with Christ, and I'm going to fight the good fight. And I'm going to, you know, grin and bear it, because I got to take my cross up and be a man about it. And to show an example that I'm going to still provide for my family. I'm still going to do my prayers. I'm still going to help my wife and my children. And then, but not only that, I'm going to help my Lord, my Savior, and also my neighbors. And that's why, you know, I've continued with the different radio shows that I'm on and the podcast on Radio Maria, and also giving all these different talks at the retreat center that I live near here, Malvern Retreat House, and traveling, actually, giving talks of you know, wherever they want me. So yes, even though it's difficult, I will do wherever the Lord sends me. I mean, look at St. Paul, right? Look what happened to him when he was stoned to, like, looked like they died, right? And after they stoned him, he got up like cheering and just thanking the Lord for being able to suffer in his name. And where did he end up going back? He went back to the same city which they threw him out and wanted to kill him. So he was like a glutton for punishment, that, you know, he would do anything for God. And that kind of man inspires me. You know, St. Paul, the person who loves the Olympics and talks about it, and also, you know, shadow boxing. He seems to like boxing like I do. And, you know, he's a tent maker. He's like a man's man out there, and being tossed about in the sea, being thrown overboard. Nothing will stop him. And so to me, it's like that's the grit that Catholic men have to be like. They have to look at the great saints, the apostles, the martyrs, and we're all called to be saints. And that's what I want to be. You know, I'm, you know, not maybe canonized. I just want to get to heaven. That's what I mean. I want to be a person that makes it to heaven and bring my whole family. Absolutely.
No, definitely. Do you feel that you're able to kind of model in a certain way Christ for people in a certain way by showing any kind of frailty, by showing any kind of ill health? Is that a reminder for people of their own, perhaps, you know, the frailty of human life and their impending mortalities, and in a certain sense, a reminder to them of what's important? Aren't you more closely mirroring through your suffering, through your condition, the crucified Christ, and almost calling people to a life of repentance? Do you ever feel that?
Yes, people have seen me. You know, it's not like I'm trying to be seen and to have people like pity me or anything. It's just that when I'm just so short of breath, or I can't walk, or I'm so weak, people can see that. But they can see that I'm trying as hard as I can to walk, you know, whether a physical therapist sees that, or the nurses see that, or people at church when I still go to mass every time, even though it's hard for me to walk and to kneel and to stand and sit, that, you know, I hope they see Christ reflected on me, not to look at me, but if I can be a mirror when they see me, they actually see Christ, not me. You know, it's that reflection I hope they are able to see of Jesus himself.
Well, it's like from Charles Dickens in A Christmas Carol, where Tiny Tim says that when people look upon him, that they'll really see Christ and remember who it is that made the lame walk and the blind see. And I think there's something to that. And it's something, especially in the West, where problems, these really basic human problems, sickness, poverty, they're hidden from us. The sick are entombed in hospitals, and the poor, you know, we have an abundant welfare system and safety net system, so that the poor in America are morbidly obese. And all of these problems are hidden away. They're squirreled away. So when you do get to see somebody who has certain frailties in public life, I think it gives people a moment to pause and reflect on what matters and on what their priorities are.
Right. I just think about, you know, St. Pope John Paul II too. You know, in his days, especially when, you know, he was that, you know, sick and he couldn't move or talk, you know, people saw Christ in him. And again, look at, you know, Pope Benedict, the same thing. And so, you know, I hope that when people see me, they would see Christ. That'd be a great compliment, more than anything else. And that, you know, if people again could get inspiration, and also just go closer amidst the pain and suffering, not to eschew it away as if it's totally bad. I mean, it is bad to suffer and have pain, but there's actually a positive side to it if you use it. You know, there's a saying, like this past weekend when I gave a talk, no pain, no gain, you know, no guts, no glory, right? The no cross, no crown. And so this is part of it, where, you know, you can tell what true joy versus false joy is the false joy, you get the pleasure first and the pain later. But the true joy, you get the pain first and the pleasure later. In other words, when people work out, right, or look at the Olympians, right, it caused so much pain and suffering and endurance to get to that point. And then there's the exhilaration of finishing up, you know, the race and being, you know, just at least doing that and being on the Olympics. So to me, this is the finish line is heaven, and I want to get there. And whether I'm toting around this oxygen or not, I'm going to try my best to be, you know, as strong and as positive as possible getting there.
Have you ever given any consideration to the fact that it's also a great blessing, and I mean this only in a certain sense, not in like a blunt or offensive way at all, that we have people who are needy, who are dependent, who are not of sound body, exactly to give people the opportunity to flex their charity, to be charitable, to show love of God and love of neighbor. Because in the West, we hear so much in the Gospels about giving the needy your tunic, or giving alms to those who are wanting. But then you go in America and it's like, boy, I want to be Christ-like. I want to be generous. I want to donate of myself. But it's almost hard to find a place where I can go do that. I almost have to go seek it out. I'm not confronted with it much on the way to work, where I can just, buy somebody a meal who's in need and who is going hungry that day. Rather, that stuff's all been taken care of by a growing socialistic state that's trying to be the father to all people, that's taking care of people's needs, but doing it in a cold, detached, unsatisfactory way that nevertheless robs Christian folk of the ability and the opportunity to give of themselves to others in need. Do you feel like perhaps, it's a good thing that we have more visibility for people who are disabled, because that allows for people to be charitable? I mean, think how much even a spouse can benefit from having to truly serve every day, day in and day out, to make life possible for a disabled spouse.
Great point. I mean, God gives us opportunities. I love the Opus Dei, that affected me a lot. And there's this book that says Christ is passing by. And what I took from that is, when you see the suffering Christ walking by you, what are you going to do? Are you just going to look at him? Or are you going to just turn your eyes? Or are you going to help him? So when I think about the Blessed Mother, the Passion of the Christ, that moment in the scene where Christ falls down, and St. John is trying to let the Blessed Mother go to him, but she's scared, or she's hesitant at the very least. And then she has this visual where she remembers Jesus as a boy falling down, and how she rushes to pick him up. And that makes her move to go and run to Jesus. And when she does, Jesus locks eyes with her and is invigorated and looks at her and throws his shoulders back and says, "Behold, I make all things new." I mean, that's from Revelations. And to me, when you see somebody coming and help you, it just makes you stronger. And so this is the opportunity that everybody else has, whether you're a spouse or you're a family member, a friend, a co-worker. I have so many people that came up to help me, and I'm so grateful for them. Whether they provided, funds to help me medically, or cards or prayers. There was an overflow, an avalanche, of help, a torrent of graces of people just given that opportunity to show their love. So it is important for people to see those who are sick, disabled, elderly, and when they see them, their hearts could be moved to then do works of mercy, corporal works of mercy or spiritual works of mercy. Because in fact, we know in Matthew 25, what is God going to judge us when he comes back, on Judgment Day, whether we did those works of mercy.
Yeah, I think there is a poverty of the needy, of the poor in the opulent West, and that's actually affecting people's spiritual lives in a way that's not good. We forget about our own death, we forget about our own mortality, we don't think about death, judgment, heaven, hell, and that redounds to some people's eternal, not benefit. That's for sure. Now, earlier, and I didn't mean to marginalize the redemptive suffering and the great graces it can merit for people. I was merely cautioning against kind of shoehorning people who do have any kind of disability into this box where they can do nothing but suffer for the world, where they can't give work for Christ in an outward way in the world. That's what I was cautioning about. But of course, right, redemptive suffering is a thing, and it's very important in Christian spirituality. Tell me, just based on your personal experience, has your suffering made you feel closer to Christ? Have you had any breakthroughs in faith in your journey because of your suffering?
Yes, for sure. When I had that original back injury, that's what led me to become a Carmelite, because I was able to, pray to deeper levels and reach the heights of, contemplation, but also read a lot of theology and philosophy books. That just led to more prayer, where I got to commune with God and also appreciate receiving the Eucharist and all the various sacraments such as confession. Just going to Mass as well, I received so many mystical experiences at Mass, also at prayers. I don't want to make it seem like I'm holier than thou in any way, but what happens in all these different sufferings, that when you unite it, God does reward people. He does. And I did also, I'm not trying to fall into that, heresy of Jansenism, like how Saint Therese Little Flower would talk about. But there's this book that I would recommend to everybody, written by Father Michael Gately, 33 Days to Merciful Love, which was really instrumental to me, where, I offered myself in merciful love as a victim in that way, not a victim of suffering. You see what I mean? A victim of merciful love. And if I may, there's a short story about that Father Gately talks about, where Therese, I think she was 15 at the time. She was talking about people, how they should really try to shoot for heaven, that you can try to go straight to heaven versus trying to just wishing to go to purgatory. And I think the sub-prioress, Sister Fabroni, scolded Therese about that, you should just be lucky to go to purgatory. Well, Sister Fabroni ended up dying shortly after of the flu, I think within that year or 6 months. And she appeared to Therese in a dream, and really regretting the fact that she didn't listen to Therese, that she wished she would have followed Therese's advice about God's merciful love, not the Jansenist type of way. And so the Sister Fabroni just asked Therese to ask the community to pray for her and to offer masses so she can be released from purgatory. But so my point is that, I did make an offering to merciful love many, many years ago when I was healthy. And so that was between me having the back injury and this pulmonary fibrosis. And then it came to a point where now that, when I had pulmonary fibrosis, it was easy for me to offer, the suffering. So there's a sense of victimhood. Some people would think, that I'm a victim soul, and whatever that might be, I'm just happy to serve the Lord and unite whatever I do, whether I'm suffering or not, with Christ, and then it's worth more. I think mathematically a lot. So I would think my 2 cents, if I added to Christ's infinity, it's worth infinity. So I'm just going to invest in him and everything will be okay.
Sure. No, absolutely wise words. No deviating from that, of course. Final question, just I mean, for those in the audience who may be in a place where they're suffering, they're disabled, they're severely sick, do you have any encouragement to give them? Do you have any words, exhortations, words of sending almost, that you can give them, something where they can go out and feel like they have a place in this world, not just as suffering souls, but as, warriors for Christ in this world?
Yes, well, the Bible verse that I just really go back and forth to is, in my weakness, he is strong. God will show his power through your weakness. So when you're chosen to suffer, it's actually an honor. So whether that is a disability or a mental illness, psychological, emotional illness, or just problems with unemployment, or just everyday problems, you're chosen to carry your cross, and that's how you can be a hero. And then, so the more weak a person is in whichever way, any good that happens from it is really because of God. And so you should have happiness and glory of being that vehicle, that tool for our Lord to give him honor and praise. And so just being that tool for our Lord, that he can use you to help change the world, that all it takes is just one person. And so look at what Curé of Ars, the devil even told him, if there were three people like the Curé cure of ours, Satan's kingdom would end. So we just need 3 priests like that. Or, well, what about, just good lay people, to go out there? Like, I mean, look at your apostolate there with Michael Voris and all you in Church Militant. You guys are out in the forefront, speaking the truth and to wherever it leads. So, God bless you all in your ministry and apostolate. And so I just thankful to be on the show.
No, thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Raymundo. And God willing, your health will improve and you'll continue to feel better and better so you can be stronger in your ministry and be a greater servant of the Lord each day. That's all the time we have for this week. Everybody, thank you for tuning in to Mic'd Up. Please do make sure to support Church Militant, with both your views and with your donations. Everything we do here takes a lot of work, and that takes money and time and man hours. So please, for those of you who are getting something from our programming, make sure you support us. God love you. This is David Gordon signing off.